Hi, my name's Dan. This video is the first one in a series that I'm doing on particle systems using Niagara in Unreal. So in this video, I'm just going to talk about particle systems and what they are and a little bit about how they work so that you've got some underlying concepts and hopefully some understanding that will take you forwards. So you're probably aware of particle systems. The words have been around for a while. The stuff that you can see on screen right now, all these effects have been done using particle systems. We've got smoke up on the top right there, snow, we've got this kind of dusty thing, there's cartoony stuff, there's this water here, there's fire, there's sparks, there's these zipping around things, whatever they are. Particle systems are really, really versatile and can do lots of things. Uh, Unfortunately, that also means they're quite complicated and quite difficult to get them to do what you want. Uh, so the basic principles of particle systems are that they use lots of really small elements to give some kind of larger effect. And there are various base types here, and we've got each of these displayed. So this is a sprite-based, which basically has small quads, which are like little squares, on which a texture has been drawn. And these quads are moving and they're what's called billboarded, which means they're constantly facing the camera, the virtual camera. The next one along here is a mesh-based system. So this actually is emitting 3D meshes. And you can see there's lots of these kind of rocks being created. It's best to use simple meshes because otherwise the calculations that you're making are going to be quite complicated. And then the last one over here is a ribbon-like system. So it's like a sprite, but it's got long, thin strands. And they can be fixed at one end, like this looks like kind of almost hair-like system. It's not a proper hair system. Or they can kind of be moving through space. So the kind of where the front end is moving along and the back end is disappearing to follow it, like the classic Snake game. There's another type which is light systems which give you light emission particles, but they're often combined with other types. And this one over here with the sparks almost certainly would have lights involved with it as well. You can also use particle systems to do fur, hair, and grass and other related kind of strandy things. And these can be achieved by taking a particle system and drawing the whole lifetime of a particle at once and then making changes to the system. So it's kind of like a particle system, if that makes sense. I'm not going to be covering these techniques in this series of videos. Or that's not my intention right now. If they appear later, then I've obviously expanded the series. There's a few things you need to know in particular about Unreal and the use of particle systems. So one is that you can choose whether your particle effects use the CPU or the GPU for calculation. So that's the normal processor on the computer or the graphics processor. Graphics processors are very, very fast. So they can do really good calculations for these. So they allow much more complicated systems. Well, actually not more complicated, but systems with more particles and faster response. But the CPU systems have more options and can do things like light emissions um, and some of the physics stuff isn't available in the GPU versions. So there are two elements that you really need to think about with particle systems, which are emitters and particles. So an emitter is a system that spawns new particles. And this is usually based on either a point in space or an area in space. And there's usually some kind of randomness built into how it spawns particles. And an emitter itself can change over time. So you might need some parameters for how the emitter is changing and how it's changing the spawning process of particles. And then the particles themselves are usually moving and they may also, or almost certainly, will be changing over time. So the process that is gone through for a particle system is that it does a simulation update. So it works out any changes of movement, any other changes, physics that might be involved. Then it renders and then it repeats. And in fact, this is quite similar to the process that a full game goes through. It works out if there's any changes to the game, then renders and then repeats. So it's like a mini game, but with no interactivity. Oh, there might be some. Oh, never mind. Let's move on. So spawners give the particles the initial location and velocity. This picture I've got here of this hippo with a jetpack, the spawner is moving with the hippo, so it's fixed to the inside or to the bottom of this jetpack over here. And it can have a spawn area and a shape. The spawner is moving. As I said, it can change over time. It can be continuous. It can be a burst and then stop. So an explosion would just give you a single burst. It can be sporadic. It can go kind of up and down in the amount that it spawns. And that might be interactive. It might depend on input from the user. And then the particles, there's loads and loads of things that you can do manipulating them. This sparks effect that we've got here, for example, has got some movements. It's got gravity. It's got a velocity initially that's been thrown out. It's probably not being affected by wind. Over time, the sparks start as very bright yellow and become a kind of duller red. And as you can see, there are some down here that are hitting this, what's possibly a table, I don't know, and they're bouncing around. And so there's some more gravity stuff going on there. And then they have a lifetime, and after a certain amount of time, the particle needs to be destroyed because otherwise the simulation is just going to get more and more and more complicated. So particle systems, the particles usually have a limited lifetime. Okay, and you can combine these things in various ways. There's all sorts of things you can do, as I've said, and as you can see. One particular interesting one I find is fireworks, because this has got a system that is shooting sparks out from the bottom down here behind these buildings. And as the sparks come up, they then get to a point where they create an emitter. And that emitter then is like the explosion of the rocket, and you get a whole lot of sparks coming out of that. So this is particles that create emitters that then create their own particles. It's all sorts of combinations that are possible. So coming very particularly to Unreal, there are two systems now in Unreal that you can use to create particles. And this series of videos is going to focus on the second one, which is Niagara. There is an earlier system which is called Cascade that's been around for years. I think it predates Unreal 4. I think it's from earlier versions of the engine. It is quite different in its interface from other Unreal systems. Niagara is new, it's not fully integrated, and it's still currently a plugin. We're going to go over to Unreal now and have a quick look at that. So here in Unreal, if we right-click and we choose Particle System here, this will allow us to create a new particle system. But this is a particle system which is being created in Cascade, which is the old version. And so for this set of videos, we're not going to be having a look at this particularly. Also, if you go into the starter content and you find the particle systems in here, these have all been made with Cascade as well. And so when you double click them, they open up in Cascade in that editor. If you want to create Niagara related systems, then you need to right click, and it may or may not be here in your menu. It is here if it's been enabled, and in the next video I'm going to show you how to enable the Niagara plugin. It's really easy. So here you would have the different Niagara elements that are available. So in the next video, as I've said, I'm going to show you how to enable Niagara if it's not been enabled in your installation of Unreal. But that's it from me for now.